On today's hot sheet, I'm discussing blue versus red home shopper migration and the S&P Case-Shiller and FHFA home price indices just released this morning. Today is Tuesday, October 29, 2024. I am Byron Lazine, and the hot sheet starts now. Welcome into the hot sheet. Let me know in the live chat which market you are tuning in from today. I'm here in my Naples, Florida studio, and we are 1 week away from Election Day. I voted yesterday. I'm not going to tell you who to vote for, but if we can't talk about some of the impacts of the election onto real estate, then what are we really doing? I will not be, again, telling you who to vote for in this discussion. We're not going to get into the divisive side of politics. But politics and who gets into office does play a big role in the things that we care about in the housing industry. Obviously, housing is impacted, inflation, the economy. These are all things that you, as a real estate professional, should know and should be able to talk about and communicate with your clients and customers about. Everyone says, hey, stay away from politics. Okay, you're going to be pretty vanilla if you're not able to dabble into some of the politics that impact the economy and what's going on in the markets, and certainly inflation and in housing. So, as I've said for 10 years on my local radio show, which is on a political station, by the way, we're going to talk about just that, the economy and the housing market. We're going to stay away from the divisive side of politics. But 1 week away from the election, we should be able to have these discussions. And really, throughout the course of your business, you should be able to be educated enough to know how to have discussions about what's going on, what's impacted. Certainly locally, local politics are going to impact your housing market maybe more than anything. Realtor.com did an analysis with all that being said that finds 9 states could become bluer, while 22 states could shift redder in the 2024 election, which is just 1 week from today. I know so many of you guys could probably get out there and early vote if the time permits, so you don't miss next Tuesday. Their methodology used was to analyze the shifting interests and patterns of U.S. home shoppers. So this is Realtor.com data. Okay, so online home traffic data from Realtor.com spanning from January 21 to January 2024. Okay, to further explore moving interest by political affiliation, they examined county level results from the 2020 presidential election. We determined the likelihood of each online view being associated with blue, red, or independent shopper based on the proportion of votes each party received in the 2020 presidential election, which I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, I think 2020 was the most votes ever recorded. So a lot of data for Realtor.com to go through there. So, for instance, if 60% of voters in each county were Democrats, then they would estimate that Realtor.com, meaning 60% of online traffic from that county, comes from blue shoppers. So this approach simplifies the analysis by assuming that the political affiliations of online shoppers mirror the voter distribution of their respective counties. So they're not factoring in income, age, housing preferences that also may influence online home shopping behavior. So, okay, that tells me how they got there. Not perfect, but it's probably, it's probably got some merit. They spent some time on this, and they obviously, put together a pretty robust analysis here as we lead into the election. So here are the states, according to Realtor.com, that blue shoppers are looking for homes in. Florida being at the top, 12.9% of online views from blue shoppers. So if you take all blue shoppers as they're describing them with these county, how they voted in 2020, obviously some people could have changed from 2020 to this year. I get that. But based on 2020 party affiliations, if you took 100% of those blue voters, 12.9% of the shoppers went to look for homes in Florida. Now, Florida's been popular overall, so that makes sense, okay? Despite the Florida might be voting one way, blue shoppers see value in living there. That was followed by Texas, North Carolina, Tennessee, and Pennsylvania. All 5 of these states are pretty much in the conversation. Certainly Pennsylvania and North Carolina are in the conversation big time as swing states as we lead into next week. Those were the top 5 states that blue shoppers looked for homes in between January 21st and September 2024. Now for which states red shoppers are looking for homes in, look at that. It happens to be basically exactly the same. You've got Florida, Texas, North Carolina, Tennessee, and South Carolina. So the only flip there was Pennsylvania was out as one of the top 5 for red shoppers. Pennsylvania is still picking up 3.1% of red shopper population. Florida coming in first for both. So 12.8% versus 12.9%, 12.8 for red, 12.9% for blue. On Florida, Texas, number 2 in both scenarios. So just like we've seen the most inbound migration over the last number of years, 5-6 years, when you look at Florida and Texas, that's unchanged when you go to, how people are voting or voter registration in these counties, at least in 2020. Okay. Blue versus red home shopper migration preferences. So you see here now, when we look at this map, Florida and Texas that don't have any red or blue coloring, because that 12.8, 12.9% was basically, Florida was a wash. Okay. You had just as many blue shoppers versus red shoppers looking. So a darker blue color indicates the state is more favorable by out-of-state blue shoppers than by red, and vice versa. So you see the Northeast really dominated by that blue. Pennsylvania, New Jersey is maybe the most dominant of out-of-state. Remember, these are out-of-state. So that you also have in-state, which we'll get to. You're an in-state, registered blue or red, and you're going to stay in state and move. They've got some analysis on that as well. But this is just those out of state, somebody migrating to a new state, and where their party affiliation is. So if you're going from another state into the Northeast, that's dominated by the blue. By the way, the Northeast, sometimes you get, that could be an easier move out of state if you're moving Connecticut to Massachusetts, or Boston to Hartford, or Providence to Hartford, or something like that. Those are kind of easy moves. You can still just get in a car on a weekend and go to Providence. It's not like a big deal, but you're gonna have some of those state line moves. Jersey was the strongest there again. Pennsylvania, and then you start getting in, what they call that blue wall. Really picked up more out of state blue shoppers. Okay, those 3 states that they call the blue wall. All those guys on the news. Okay, so which states do local? So in-state local blue shoppers prefer to stay in. You can see Florida and Texas being the highest numbers there, 76 and 71. I'm sorry, Michigan was also up there. So you've got Florida, Michigan, Ohio, Texas, and Wisconsin being in the top 5. So when you think about, okay, where are blue shoppers preferring to stay in, those 5 states lead all other states. Some of the big states that are going to be in the conversation here over the next 7 days would certainly be Michigan and Wisconsin to some degree, maybe Texas, Florida, and Ohio probably in the bag, which direction they're going. Which states do local red shoppers prefer to stay in? Michigan now back. So does Michigan, the local red shoppers preferring to stay there, wash out some of the blue shoppers that are preferring to stay in the state? So Michigan, Florida, Texas, Ohio, Wisconsin all make the list. So what else it tells you about those 5 states, because they're on the list there twice, is that Florida, Texas, Ohio, Wisconsin, Michigan, when people are looking to move, they want to stay in state. Okay. There's not an exodus going on in any of those states. People who live in those states want to be there. That right there, I might use that as like, because listen, when you're looking at some of the information that you're going to put out this week, to your database or any kind of marketing, there's this thing that the broke agent always talks about called trend jacking. You want to hit topics that are going to be front and center for the majority of people in your community. Okay. And you could put something out, say you're in Michigan, like, hey, based on this, blue shopper versus red shopper study, we found that most people just love Michigan. You could make it a great thing about your state. They want to stay here. Whether you're blue or red, you're not exiting out. You love Michigan. You're moving and shopping from within. There could be a really interesting hook there that gets the attention when you talk about blue versus red versus this week, but then creates a great story about your state that most people who move, despite political affiliation or what have you, want to stay right here. We've put together the top 10 reasons why people want to stay in Michigan. We actually interviewed, 100 of the clients that we've worked with over the last X amount of time. And now you're layering your study on top of a study like this. By the way, all the charts and data in the hot sheet show notes are going to be available for all BAMX members. BAMX members, in honor of the new platform that every BAMX member has to get more listings with Zoodealio. We have a code called Zoo if you're not a BAMX member to get into BAMX at the lowest discount today. Retention between local blue and red home shoppers. So the darker blue indicates that the state has a higher retention rate for whether it be red or blue than vice versa. So Florida actually a higher retention rate for local blue home shoppers than with red. Okay. Then you probably have heard, hey, people want out of New York that are thinking this way or that way. No, New York has a higher retention for local red shoppers than with blue. Okay. So maybe some surprises there. Georgia, that's a swing state. They're on the red side of that equation. Some other ones that stick out would be, Texas is shaded red. Maybe nothing else is dark. The darker the color there indicates New Mexico going strong blue there, but the darker the color indicating a bigger swing between retention between local blue and local red shoppers. New York, Georgia, and Florida being the ones that stick out the most, particularly Georgia, because of the impact Georgia will have in just a week time frame or over this week. There's also an analysis here. So Laura, this is when you listen to mainstream media. I agree. Laura says some of this is quite surprising when you pair it with the political news that we hear. When you listen to mainstream media and how they say everybody's doing this, or everybody's going to this state for this reason, or everybody is wanting out of this state because of their local politics. When you look at New York there, just going back to that, like New York is a big state, remember, okay? Manhattan is a big part of New York, not land wise, but a big part population wise. But the rest of the state, man, I don't know how many of you guys have been to upstate New York. There's a lot of different New Yorks to experience in New York State. And so if you've been there your whole life, I mean, they're retaining a higher rate of red home shoppers than they are blue. And then look at Florida retaining more of the blue. So much different than maybe what you've heard. And this is why it's important to actually have this analysis, because you might be talking to a seller in your local market like, oh my gosh, over the next 3 years, I think everybody's going to leave my state because of XYZ political views. I really want to stay in the state, but I think I should sell now. Like, when should I sell? I got to get out of here. I got to follow everybody else. And it's like, whoa, slow down. What do you mean everybody else? Let's take a look at the data of what's actually happening in our state. I mean, there's not any state that you can point to that's going to go population zero anytime soon. Okay, so let's take a look at what the numbers are telling us. Let's take a look at a variety of data and not listen to, Fox News and CNN as our real estate source of information of what's going to happen with population in the future. That's going to be a very, very small percentage of consideration, if any, when you're having these conversations with your clients. Maybe the only consideration would be to um, would be to debunk debunk the headline. Okay, so this one's interesting. Realtor.com analysis found that there are 9 states that could become bluer in terms of how they're going to cast ballots next week, based on the 21 to 24 home shopping trends. So this is kind of summarizing it up, where Realtor.com saying, hey, these states could be bluer come next Tuesday versus the 22 states that could shift redder come next Tuesday on this election, meaning bluer or redder potentially based on these moves, if these people kept the same political affiliation and all of that, versus Tuesday, what's going to happen in a week, versus 2020, what happened in the last election. Okay, so Florida has been labeled as one of those 9 states that could go bluer. Maine, Connecticut, Nevada, which is one of those more important states. Okay, Alaska, maybe not an electoral college phenom. Okay, but they're in the mix there. In terms of the 22 that could go red, some of the ones that stand out, you've got both Carolinas, Georgia, Texas, Arizona going. That's an important one when you look at it. Okay, New York signaling, despite the fact that in-state local shoppers, I'm sorry, New York was in-state local shoppers red staying, but also New York maybe shifting more red, maybe not after that MSG rally, but it was well attended. So who knows? For the whole list there of the trends, you can grab those in your hot sheet show notes available on BAMX. So the total list of 9 there was Alaska, Connecticut, Delaware, DC, trending bluer, Florida, Maine, Nevada, Ohio, Wisconsin. The states expected to trend redder. And so here are the states trending redder in the 24 election. There's a total of 21. There's 12 states that are trending redder that were decisively won in 2020 by former President Trump. Those were Kansas, Kentucky, Louisiana, Missouri, Nebraska, North and South Dakota, Tennessee, Texas, Utah, Wyoming. The 7 states that were won by President Biden in 2020 that are now projected to shift redder are California, Colorado, Illinois, Minnesota, New York, Oregon, Wisconsin. None of those states, by the way, those 7 are in the conversation to maybe flip. So maybe shading redder, but not really. I'm not hearing any polls. I mean, I guess Minnesota would be the closest thing to a potential swing state, but still not projected to swing. Now, the 3 swing states that could lean further red are Arizona, Georgia, North Carolina. Those are the ones to pay attention to. Because they're very contested battle. They mean something when we take a look next Tuesday and Tuesday night when they're breaking down the map. Key battleground states, there's an uncertain outlook for Pennsylvania and Michigan, despite higher influxes of blue shoppers. Local blue residents in these states are more likely to move away compared to their red counterparts. So Pennsylvania and Michigan, you had uncertain outlooks when pulling the final analysis out of this data. And then we went over how they got that data. So I thought it was an interesting study there by Realtor.com. No, I don't think anybody has to get angry about that stuff, what have you. If I really you know, if I really upset your breakfast this morning, I apologize. I'm so sorry. We couldn't have that rational conversation about the realtor.com analysis on how people are moving. There is a post on nowbam.com talking about these migration points. It might be an interesting thing for you to do to overlap what migration trends in your market have been versus what realtor.com's analysis is. And it might be an opportunity there to start conversations in a week where conversations could be hard to come by. People are distracted by this stuff. If you send out your top 7 baking tips for the fall season this week, I'm pretty sure your baking tips are getting zero attention versus maybe putting together some thoughtful analysis on your local micro market coupled with the migration trends that are happening nationally. And that might at least be an intellectual piece that some folks in your community might be interested in. But in a week like this, where you have so much going on, it's not going to be your baking tips. I can promise you that. All right, we've got 2 big reports that came out this week, or today rather. You have the S&P, Case-Shiller, and the FHFA house price indices. Of course, the S&P Case-Shiller is considered the gold standard when it comes to housing analysis and home prices. It's the gold standard because it is such lagging data. The S&P Dow Jones released today, August 2024. I say it's such lagging data. We're talking about August and it's November, quite frankly. This data has shown a 4.2% annual gain in home prices in August 2024. So the home price appreciation continues, but the deceleration of that appreciation also continues. If you remember, July Case-Shiller data showed us a 4.8% home price gain. This number was previously in the 5s and in the 6s and above that. So home price appreciation is on the downslide. We're still appreciating. U.S. national home price, 4.2% annual gain in August, showcases that. The 10% or the 10 city composite showed an annual increase as well, that being larger than the national at 6%, despite also showing deceleration there, 6.8% in the previous month. The 20 city came in at 5.2%, while we had a 5.9% the previous month. New York showed the biggest gain. So New York, guess they're turning red, maybe not turning red entirely, but shading red, and now showing big gains on home prices. So New York topping the list here on a whole bunch of the data. If we take a look, here's at right out of the PDF from Case-Shiller. There's your 10 city, 20 city in comparison to the national. Both the city, 10 city and 20 city composites outperforming rather the national. When you look at this data from the 2022 peak, you had numbers at a level right around 184 nationally, 206 20 city, 226 10 city. This is the indice numbers. When you looked at 2012 trough, that was the bottom. You had national down 27.4, city down 35.1, 10 city down 35.3. Now, currently, we've got levels that are in the 300s, 325, 334, 352 on the 10 city. And from that trough up numbers 140% plus from that 06 peak. You've got nationally beating the rest at 76% up from the peak, 20 city up 62.1%, and 10 city up 55.6%. So real estate long-term still showing us real strength for the American homeowner. Atlanta coming in below national average year over year, according to Case-Shiller at 3.67. Boston, and I'll just go beat or under national average. Of course, national average we just mentioned. For August year over year was 4.2, or that year-over-year, or that August number is a year-over-year indicator. Boston would be above, Charlotte above, Chicago above, Cleveland above, Dallas under, Denver under, Detroit over, Vegas over, LA over, Miami over, as is LA and Miami. I think I said LA. Minneapolis under, New York, again, the highest, 8.1%. Phoenix is under, Portland is under, San Diego's over, San Francisco is under, Seattle over, Tampa under, a lot of inventory, Washington over, and then again, composite 10 and 20 city are both over the national trends. That's your Case-Shiller gold standard update on pricing, available for you inside of your hot sheet show notes, as well as any of the charts and the data there that you need to communicate with your database. FHFA, they have their report out as well, also released on the same day as Case-Shiller. And of course, my favorite chart all time, still relevant when somebody asks me about the future of home prices. I can't tell you the future, I can tell you the past. And since 1991, we've seen nothing but an absolute roar of home prices. We've seen the mortgage crisis, which we're not in right now. We've seen this. We've seen this little. Sorry for the jogging there. This little COVID blip. This inflation interest rate reaction, and that's it in terms of home prices going down. When you go on the overall, they're always going up and to the right. U.S. coming in right now, again, at the 4.2%. When we break this down regionally, according to FHFA, Pacific is up this year over last year on price change. Mountain region is flat. West, north, central down. West, south, central down. East, north, central down. East, south, central down. New England down. Middle Atlantic down. South Atlantic down. Overall there, what we're seeing is a trend of home prices continuing to go up, but not at the rate that they were. If we continue to see, inventory, we'll see what happens with inventory after election, after holidays. We're going to see what happens in the spring. If the rates kind of sit at where they're at right now, and we have rising inventory, you could foresee that the decelerating of home price appreciation continues. Eric points out Nassau County, New York, 2.7 months of supply. Hey, that's one of the reasons New York is still at 8%, while there's other cities and nationally sitting at 4% or below. When you're at 2.7% on months of supply, you're going to see an incredible gain on home price appreciation. That's exactly what you've seen there with New York. So Eric pointing that out in the live chat is absolutely on the money there. All right, 30-year fixed yesterday. Unfortunately, we saw a 30-year fix come back to 7%. Just on September 11th, we were at 6.1%. Feels like forever ago as we've gone through these last few weeks. 7% comes in on Mortgage News Daily's tracker on the 30-year fixed. Lance Lambert says, put out a piece yesterday with the 30-year fix going back to 7%. Really talked about, hey, you've got, between April 25 and September 11, 30-year fix fell from the 7.52 to 6.11. And that was all based on weaker than expected job reports. Okay, that triggered recession indicators, including that SAM rule. But shortly after, on September 18th, they were citing softer employment data. So they cut the 50 points. But then in the following weeks, we had strong employment data. And the market has reacted to that strength in employment numbers. Okay. We've seen the unemployment tick down 4.3 to back to 4.1. We've seen job growth being at double what was expected on that last employment report. Now, do I think that those numbers are accurate? I have questions. I mean, we've already seen revisions downward each of the whole entire last 12 months, but the market is reacting to strong jobs. And so again, the case is unchanged. If we want to get back down to 6 in the short term, you're going to have to see a softening job market. That's really the trade-off here. Okay. You're not just going to see a 30-year fix go back to 6%, really without that. The other thing that's killing us, and so when I talk about the top of the show, like, hey, for everybody that wants to stay away from politics, one of the things that is killing the 30-year fixed is the deficit. Okay. That 10-year, the bigger the deficit and government borrowing becomes, that 10-year and more, we've got to borrow more money now to pay off just interest on our current deficit. The more we do that, basically, the less desirable our bonds are. People don't want to hold U.S. government debt if all we're doing is borrowing and borrowing and borrowing. Okay, so if we don't get the deficit spending out under control, then you're going to see elevated interest rates for longer. That's one of the things that is killing us. And right now, there's not a lot of certainty on either side of what's going to happen with government spending. There's cases being made that both could potentially spend like drunken sailors. That's bad for the future of the 10-year, future of everything, obviously, but future of the 10-year and future of what those 30-year fix rates might look like. Today, not starting out all that great on, to be honest, on the 10-year, now up over 4.3. Yesterday, we were talking about being up over 4.2 on this show. 95% chance, according to CME, that there's going to be a quarter point cut. But we know with these Fed cuts that, that's going to come next week, by the way, election week. We have the next Fed Reserve meeting. We know that even with a cut, there's probably little impact unless we get a softening job market to really to tag team that Fed cut, so to speak. All right, there's your hot sheet here for the week. Later on the channel here. By the way, if you're getting value from the hot sheet, hit that thumbs up and subscribe to the Now Bam YouTube channel. Hot sheet is replayed every day. If you miss YouTube, obviously it's still up on YouTube as video of the day on the live channel. But if you rather listen to replays, it's available on Apple, Spotify. Love a review from either of those places. And then also here on the main YouTube channel, we will have a new Real Word podcast that'll go up later today. So stay tuned for that. Appreciate all you guys. And I will see you over there on the Real Word later this afternoon. Until then, of course, toodaloo.